Hey YouTube, today, hang on. Okay, hey YouTube, today we'll continue reading from Ripper, and today we'll be starting on chapter 8, page 33. Okay, so let's get started. Chapter 8. Carver stared at the door a good long time. Was that Miss Petty's surprise? Was he going to be adopted by a gnome? What could he do? Run away and not come back? He'd be thrown out soon enough anyway. He joked with Leah about it, but he could become a newsboy, spending nights in one of their lodges. It was better than working in a funeral parlor. How long would it take to pack? He headed back in, pelted by body heat and party sounds. Finn was in the same spot, staring enviously as Colonel Waring chatted happily with Bulldog. Mrs. Scholes grabbed his chin and turned him back. Psst! Delia was waving her hands at him. Maybe he could visit her at the Times when we picked up his newspapers for delivery. He took a step in her direction. But she motioned for him to stay put and frantically pointed in the direction of the back hallway where Miss Petty's office was. Where was Miss Petty anyway? Or the undertaker? Ah, Delia was trying to tell him they were in her office. He should just go pack, but the thought of leaving Ellis forever slowed him. Maybe he should at least try to find out what the gnome had to say. He slipped into the hallway and gently closed the door behind him. Miss Petty's office door was wide open, its light casting the oblong shadow of two talking figures. Carver pressed himself against the wall and inched along. 2 feet from the door, he still couldn't hear them. He did see them, though, reflected in the Humpty Dumpty glass. He dared another foot in time to hear the stranger say in a dismissive tone, "Of course he writes a fine letter, but in person the boy is not nearly as impressive as I'd hope." Letter? The one he'd sent to Roosevelt. What other letter would there be? Carver's heart began to pound. "I'll leave my card and let you return to your guest," said the man, rising from his seat. He laid it upright against the desk lamp. "Thank you, Mr. Hawking," Miss Petty said. Hawking. Did he work for Roosevelt? Had Carver ruined a second chance by nearly barreling over him, then being snotty about it? Any second now they'd enter the hall. He doubted that finding him spying would improve Mr. Hawking's opinion of him, but he'd never make it out in time. Why had he closed the stupid door behind him? The supply closet he often hid in was just past the office door. It wasn't far, but he'd have to cross right in front of them to reach it. When Hawking rose and faced Miss Petty, he put his back to the door, covering his view and giving Carter the chance he needed. He crouched, raced by, and slipped into the supply closet. He kicked the mop but caught the stick before it clattered to the floor. "So sorry to have wasted your time," Miss Petty said as they entered the hall. Hawking grunted. If he puts on some weight, the boy could become a bouncer. At least then his people's shoving abilities would be put to good use. Carver bit his lip. He had ruined it. He might never even know what he'd ruined. The hallway door opened and their conversation melted into the rush of the party. He waited just to be sure, then stepped out of the closet. He was alone. He might as well continue with his plan to run away. Then again, he no longer had a reason to run. Was Hawking with Roosevelt? He had to know, fingering his trusty bent nails. He approached the door to Miss Petty's office and unlocked it with ease. It wasn't the attic lock, after all. Remembering the card the man had left, he snatched it from her desk. It was printed on fine, thick paper, but kind of crumpled, as if it had been curled, then flattened. On the front, in raised letters, it read, "Albert Hawking, the Pinkerton Agency." The Pinkertons? Carver gnashed his teeth. The most famous detective agency in the world. Alan Pinkerton was the first private detective in the United States. For 50 years, he and his agents battled kidnappers, robbers, murderers, outlaw gangs, and more. He passed away, but his agency had offices everywhere. Their logo, a single eye over the motto, "We never sleep," gave birth to the term private eye. Maybe Carver could still apologize, beg, weep, if it would help. Was there an address, a phone listing? The front of the card contained nothing more than the name and the agency. He flipped it over. There were numbers and some letters on the back. 40, 42.8 west, 74.4 north. They looked pressed into the paper, typewritten. That was why it was curled. Someone had run it through a typewriter roll. Hawkins' hand was damaged, and he probably couldn't hold a pen or pencil. But why would he go to the trouble of typing some numbers? Memorizing the contents, he carefully replaced the card. Rather than be seen walking into the party from Miss Petty's office, he took the long way through the laundry area, then back around front. By the time he reached the entrance, things were breaking up. Carver scanned the milling bodies for Hawkins. It was no use. Like Roosevelt, he was gone. He couldn't even spot Miss Petty. He tried to remember every name Finn had ever called him so he could use them on himself. There were still the numbers on the card. They must mean something. If he could figure out what that was, he might still impress the man. A combination? No, there wouldn't be decimals in a combination. As he puzzled over it, Delia came up, buzzing with questions. Did you meet him? Did you talk? He looked interesting, like he'd been hurt in a war. Was he important? What did you do? When he didn't answer, she noticed his dark expression. Or should I say, what didn't you do, Carver? Tell me you did something. Oh, I did something, all right. I was in such a rush to find Roosevelt, I nearly knocked over Albert Hawking of the Pinkertons. Then I insulted him to the point where he wanted nothing to do with me. No. Carver nodded. I saw his card, but it didn't even have a city or a country, let alone a. He stopped in mid-sentence, looked briefly at Delia, then bounded down the hall. Where are you going? To make my own luck. Okay, so if you want to hear Chapter 9 of Ripper, look for my next video.